Welcome back, leaders, visionaries, and difference makers. Today, we're going to talk about something most leaders get painfully wrong: how they introduce change. We've all seen it happen: a sudden announcement, a new policy dropped like a bombshell, and the team is left scrambling, confused, frustrated, and sometimes even resentful. But what if I told you there's a better way? A way to turn fear into trust, resistance into ownership, and uncertainty into inspired action. You see, leadership is not about throwing change at people and hoping they'll survive the storm. Leadership is about guiding people through uncertainty with wisdom, clarity, and courage. It's about understanding human nature, the psychology of trust, and the power of presence. And most importantly, it's about never forgetting that at the other end of every decision you make are people who need to believe in you before they'll follow you. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the exact mindset shift every leader needs to master before announcing any change. This isn't theory, this is practical, powerful leadership that transforms how your team receives and responds to the unknown. So stay with me, because what you're about to learn may very well determine whether your next change leads to a breakthrough or a breakdown. Let's dive in. When leaders announce sudden changes without first anchoring those changes in purpose, they create confusion, anxiety, and resistance. People don't resist change because they hate change itself. They resist because they don't understand the reason behind it. The human brain is wired for meaning. Without meaning, even the best intentions feel like threats. That's why great leaders never start with what or how. They start with why. Purpose gives people something to believe in, something to connect with emotionally, something that helps them make sense of the disruption that is about to take place. When people see the deeper reason for the change, they shift from feeling like victims of change to becoming participants in something meaningful. Starting with purpose aligns the organization's mission with the personal values of the individuals involved. People want to know that their work matters and that the adjustments they are being asked to make serve a larger goal. When a leader communicates change as part of a bigger mission rather than a random decision, it taps into intrinsic motivation. People move from compliance to commitment. They no longer feel like they are being dragged through change. They walk into it willingly because they see how it serves the greater good. Purpose unites teams because it gives everyone a common cause to rally around. Even when the specific details of the change may feel uncomfortable or uncertain, purpose also provides clarity during uncertainty. Change often introduces ambiguity, and ambiguity triggers fear. But when leaders frame change inside a clear and compelling why, it creates a stabilizing force. Even if people don't have all the answers, they have direction. They know where the organization is headed and why that destination matters. This clarity helps people manage their emotions and energy during transitions. Instead of wasting mental space worrying about unknowns, they focus on contributing toward the shared goal. The mind settles when the heart understands. Leaders who skip purpose and go straight to plans unintentionally create resistance. They present new policies, procedures, or reorganizations and wonder why people push back or disengage. The resistance isn't always about the change itself. It's about the absence of context. Without purpose, change feels like chaos. With purpose, change feels like progress. Leaders who master this distinction are able to mobilize their people through even the most challenging transitions because they appeal to something greater than personal comfort or convenience. Purpose-driven change also builds trust. When leaders repeatedly connect decisions to a consistent mission or set of values, people learn that changes aren't random or self-serving. They see a leader who is guided by principles, not pressure. This consistency reassures the team that the leader can be trusted even when the road ahead feels uncertain. Trust turns fear into courage and hesitation into momentum. People don't follow leaders who simply announce decisions. They follow leaders who invite them into a story that matters, and that story always begins with purpose. When change enters an organization, it immediately threatens one of the most fragile elements of any team: psychological safety. This safety is not about comfort zones or the absence of challenge. It's about creating an environment where people feel secure enough to engage with uncertainty without fear of judgment, punishment, or shame. Sudden announcements disrupt that sense of safety. They often leave employees feeling blindsided, powerless, and suspicious. The brain interprets unexpected change as danger because it removes predictability. Leaders who ignore this natural response risk triggering anxiety, resistance, and disengagement across the organization. True leadership recognizes that before asking people to embrace change, we must first create a space where they feel emotionally safe to process and respond to it. When people feel safe, they can listen with open minds rather than defensive hearts. They can ask questions, voice concerns, and contribute ideas without fearing that their honesty will be held against them. Psychological safety doesn't eliminate difficult emotions, but it provides a secure container for those emotions to be expressed, heard, and addressed. Leaders who create this environment demonstrate empathy, which immediately signals to their team, "I see you, I hear you, and I care about how this impacts you." Building psychological safety requires intentional communication. Leaders must be transparent about what they know and what they don't know. Pretending to have all the answers undermines trust. It's far more powerful to say, "Here's why we're making this change, here's what we're still figuring out, and here's how you can help us move forward together." This kind of honesty levels the emotional playing field and makes space for genuine dialogue. People are far more willing to engage with change when they feel like active participants in the process rather than passive recipients of decisions made behind closed doors. Leaders also build psychological safety by being predictable in their values even when circumstances change. Consistency in values sends a powerful message that while the specifics may evolve, the leader's core commitment to the team remains steady. This stability allows people to trust that the leader's intentions are rooted in something bigger than short-term gains or reactionary thinking. It reassures them that their well-being matters and that they will not be discarded. As the organization adjusts course, small behaviors have an enormous impact on psychological safety. Leaders who listen without interrupting, who ask clarifying questions instead of making assumptions, who thank people for speaking up even when the message is hard to hear. These actions send continuous signals that this is a safe space to navigate change together. When people feel safe, they shift from resisting change to collaborating on how to make the change successful. They stop protecting themselves and start contributing their full energy to the future. Without psychological safety, even the most brilliant change strategy will stall. With it, even difficult transformations can succeed because the team is united, engaged, and emotionally equipped to walk through uncertainty together. Psychological safety isn't a soft skill, it's a leadership discipline that turns fear into fuel for progress. When change is imposed on people without their involvement, it often triggers resistance, not because the change is necessarily bad, but because people feel stripped of control and ownership. Human beings have an innate need to feel agency in their own environment. When that sense of agency is removed, even the best intentions behind the change can feel threatening. That's why leaders who are wise about change don't impose it. They invite participation. They understand that involving people in the process of change transforms fear into engagement, skepticism into ownership, and resistance into collaboration. Involving your team early in the process sends a clear message: their voices matter. This doesn't mean every decision becomes a group vote or that leadership abdicates responsibility. It means leaders create forums, conversations, and opportunities for people to contribute their insights, ask questions, express concerns, and even challenge ideas respectfully. When people see that their input is genuinely valued and has influence on the outcome, their posture toward change shifts dramatically. They stop bracing for impact and start leaning into possibility. Co-creation doesn't just build buy-in, it often produces better solutions. The people closest to the work usually have insights leaders may not fully grasp. They see the practical implications of new systems, policies, or strategies. Inviting their perspectives can help refine plans, anticipate obstacles, and create more thoughtful, effective change. Leaders who fail to involve their people not only miss out on valuable wisdom, but also create unnecessary friction that could have been prevented when people are involved in the process. They also develop a personal investment in the success of the change. They feel responsible not just for executing someone else's plan, but for ensuring that the vision becomes reality. This sense of shared ownership fuels motivation and strengthens team cohesion. People work harder for what they help build. They take pride in being part of the solution rather than feeling like powerless observers of decisions made far above them. This approach also builds trust. Transparency about the process demonstrates respect for your team's intelligence and experience. Leaders who involve others show humility by acknowledging that they don't have all the answers, and that collective wisdom is stronger than isolated authority. Over time, this trust compounds, creating a culture where people expect to be engaged, where open dialogue becomes normal, and where fear of change diminishes because the process feels inclusive rather than authoritarian. Involving people early also allows leaders to identify and address resistance before it hardens into opposition. Concerns can be surfaced, misunderstandings clarified, and fears discussed while there is still flexibility to adapt. This proactive engagement prevents small issues from growing into major obstacles. It builds resilience within the team, equipping them emotionally and practically to handle the inevitable bumps that come with any transition. Leaders who involve instead of impose recognize that change is not something to be delivered to people, but something to be built with people. This mindset transforms the entire change experience from one of top-down mandates to a shared journey where every person feels seen, heard, and valued along the way. Leaders often make the mistake of treating change communication like a broadcast. They prepare a polished announcement, deliver it to the team, and expect alignment to follow. But real communication isn't a monologue, it's a conversation. When leaders approach change as a dialogue, they create space for their people to engage emotionally, intellectually, and relationally with what's happening. Dialogue allows for questions, clarifications, feedback, and even healthy dissent, which are all necessary elements for true understanding and commitment to take root. When people feel they have no voice, they either disengage or quietly resist. But when they are invited into the conversation, they shift from feeling controlled to feeling considered. This simple but profound shift changes the dynamic of how change is received. Leaders who encourage dialogue send a message that the people affected by the change are not just numbers or resources, but trusted partners in the journey. They recognize that change is not something to be dictated, but something to be navigated together. A conversation allows leaders to address the real emotions that change often triggers. Anxiety, confusion, fear, and even anger are natural responses. In a monologue, those emotions get suppressed or ignored, but in a dialogue, they can be expressed, acknowledged, and processed. This builds trust because it shows that the leader is not afraid to confront uncomfortable realities. It's not about having all the answers, but being willing to listen and lead with empathy. People don't expect their leaders to eliminate all uncertainty, but they do expect honesty and presence involving people in two-way communication. Also allows leaders to tap into the collective intelligence of the team. Often, employees have insights, experiences, and solutions that leadership may not have considered. By fostering open dialogue, leaders gain valuable perspectives that can strengthen the plan and avoid unforeseen pitfalls. This collective problem solving empowers the team and fosters a sense of ownership over the change. When people help shape the path forward, they are far more invested in seeing it succeed. Dialogue also reinforces clarity. Many times, resistance to change is rooted in misunderstanding rather than disagreement. A one-way announcement leaves too much room for assumptions and rumors. A conversation, however, allows leaders to ensure that everyone truly understands the why, what, and how of the change. Questions can be answered in real time, misconceptions corrected, and expectations clarified. This reduces confusion and aligns the team more effectively. Moreover, conversations humanize the process of change. They turn abstract strategies into personal experiences. They allow leaders to see how the change is impacting individuals on a human level, which builds compassion and strengthens relationships. People feel seen and respected when their thoughts are invited and valued. This sense of dignity fuels morale, even in the face of challenging transitions. Ultimately, leaders who communicate through conversation rather than monologue cultivate a culture of openness and trust that sustains not only the current change but future ones as well. Dialogue lays the foundation for long-term resilience because people know they will always have a voice in shaping what comes next. One of the most overlooked aspects of leading change is timing. Leaders often focus so heavily on the asterisk, what asterisk of change, that they neglect the asterisk when asterisk. But timing has the power to make or break how people receive and respond to new initiatives. Sudden, rushed announcements, no matter how well-intentioned, create unnecessary stress, confusion, and even resentment. On the other hand, carefully timed communication allows people to mentally and emotionally prepare, which dramatically increases the likelihood of successful adoption. Every change has its own natural rhythm. Wise leaders take the time to understand the dynamics at play within their teams, organizations, and even the personal lives of their people. If you introduce significant changes during seasons of already high stress, during busy quarters, right before major deadlines, or immediately after previous shifts, you stack pressure on top of pressure, leaving your people feeling overwhelmed. Instead of seeing the opportunity within the change, they experience only the weight of another burden added to their already full plates. Good timing allows space for anticipation. When leaders give advance notice that change is coming, they respect their people's need for psychological preparation. This space helps reduce the emotional shock that often accompanies abrupt announcements. People have time to ask questions, process implications, and adjust their expectations. This doesn't mean all details need to be shared immediately, but even a simple heads up, we're evaluating some necessary adjustments that may affect our direction in the coming months, gives people a chance to brace themselves for what lies ahead. Leaders who respect timing also understand the value of pacing. Change does not need to be implemented in one giant leap. Breaking it into smaller, manageable phases allows people to adjust incrementally rather than being forced to absorb everything at once. Each step can be communicated clearly, with time for feedback and course correction along the way. This measured approach reduces anxiety and gives people confidence that leadership is not recklessly rushing forward, but guiding the process with wisdom and care. In addition, good timing is sensitive to relationships. Leaders who know their teams understand the unspoken signals, morale levels, personal struggles, team dynamics that influence how change will land. Announcing sweeping change the day after layoffs, during team conflict, or while morale is already fragile demonstrates a lack of emotional intelligence. But waiting until the team has stabilized or addressing lingering concerns before introducing new shifts honors both the individuals and the collective spirit of the organization. Timing also communicates respect for people's humanity. Leaders who think only in terms of strategy often forget that every policy, structure, or system change ultimately impacts real people with real lives. Respecting timing says to your team, I see you, I value your experience, and I'm considering how this will affect not just the company, but you as individuals. That simple layer of care makes people far more willing to trust the process and support the outcome in the end. Change isn't only about strategy and structure, it's deeply personal. Leaders who master the art of timing transform change from something people endure into something they willingly embrace because they feel led rather than pushed. Leaders who guide their teams through change often underestimate the power of storytelling. Facts, data, and charts may explain what is happening, but they rarely move people to embrace why it's happening. Humans are wired for stories because stories speak to the heart before they speak to the mind. When leaders connect change to a narrative that people can relate to, they make the journey feel personal, meaningful, and worth the effort. This is not about spinning a version of reality, but about framing the change within a context that gives it purpose and hope. Every change introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty fuels anxiety. People naturally begin to ask questions. Why is this happening? What does it mean for me? What will the future look like? If these questions remain unanswered, fear fills the gap. But when leaders offer a story, a vision of where we are going, how we'll get there, and why it matters, they replace fear with direction. A compelling narrative helps people see themselves as participants in something bigger than themselves, something significant that requires their contribution and commitment. Storytelling also honors the past while pointing to the future. Leaders who acknowledge the hard work, sacrifices, and successes that brought the organization to this point show respect for the team's journey so far. This builds trust because it demonstrates that the change isn't happening because the past was a failure, but because new opportunities require new approaches. People are more likely to support change when they feel their previous efforts are valued, not discarded. A well-crafted story simplifies complexity. Most change initiatives involve multiple moving parts, and the more complex the message, the harder it is for people to grasp. But a story can unify all those moving pieces into a simple, memorable framework that people can hold onto. It allows the leader to say, this is who we've been, this is where we are, and this is where we're going. That clarity gives people a steady reference point. When uncertainty tries to pull them off course, leaders who use storytelling effectively make the vision tangible. Instead of speaking in vague corporate language, they paint pictures of real impact, how the change will benefit customers, strengthen the team, and open doors for future success. They describe what success will feel like and why it's worth the temporary discomfort of transition. These vivid mental images allow people to emotionally connect with the end result, making them far more willing to navigate the challenges along the way. Storytelling also builds resilience. When change becomes difficult, and it always does, people who are anchored to a larger narrative are less likely to give up. They remember the story, the purpose behind the pain, and they find the motivation to keep going. This sense of purpose fuels perseverance because people are not simply following orders. They are part of a mission in times of change. Information informs the mind, but story moves the heart. Leaders who master storytelling create emotional alignment, unify diverse teams, and inspire people to move forward together with courage and conviction, even when the path ahead is unfamiliar. Leadership during change is not a one-time act. It requires continuous presence. Many leaders make the mistake of thinking that once the change has been announced and the initial plan set in motion, their role is mostly complete. But real leadership shows up in the middle, when uncertainty rises, when doubts creep in, and when the initial excitement fades into the hard work of adjustment. Being present is not about micromanaging every detail, but about walking alongside your people through every phase of the journey. Presence builds trust. When people see their leaders remain engaged, accessible, and attentive throughout the change process, it reassures them that they are not being left to figure things out alone. Change brings moments of confusion, frustration, and emotional fatigue. A leader who remains present during these moments creates an anchor of stability. Even when answers aren't immediately available, knowing that leadership is near brings comfort and confidence to keep moving forward. Being present allows leaders to read the emotional temperature of their teams. Change affects different people in different ways. Some may adapt quickly while others struggle quietly. Leaders who stay engaged are better positioned to notice when morale dips or when certain individuals need additional support. This awareness allows for timely interventions, whether it's offering encouragement, clarifying expectations, or simply listening to concerns that need to be voiced. When people feel seen, they feel valued, and when they feel valued, they stay committed. Continuous presence also allows leaders to reinforce the vision behind the change. Vision leaks over time, especially when challenges arise and obstacles appear larger than the goal itself. Leaders who show up consistently can remind their teams of the bigger picture, reconnecting daily tasks to the purpose that inspired the change in the first place. This ongoing reinforcement keeps people aligned, motivated, and focused even when the work becomes difficult. When leaders remain visible, they also model resilience. Change rarely unfolds without setbacks. Plans shift, timelines get delayed, and unexpected challenges emerge. Leaders who face these realities alongside their teams demonstrate that setbacks are not failures but part of the process. Their steady presence communicates that while the journey may be hard, it is not hopeless. This kind of leadership strengthens the collective courage of the team, empowering them to push through moments of discouragement with renewed determination. Leaders who stay present also create space for ongoing feedback. Change is rarely perfect in its first implementation. People doing the actual work often see issues or opportunities that weren't apparent during the planning stage. Leaders who remain accessible invite these insights and adjust course when necessary. This flexibility improves outcomes and reinforces the message that leadership is listening and responsive, not rigid or detached. Ultimately, presence is a form of leadership accountability. It demonstrates that leaders are fully invested in the outcome, not just issuing commands from a distance. The act of remaining present says, "We are in this together," and that shared experience creates a bond that strengthens the team for both current challenges and those that will inevitably come in the future. At the core of effective leadership is not just the ability to create change, but the wisdom to guide people through it. Change will always trigger uncertainty, but it is the leader's role to replace fear with clarity, resistance with trust, and doubt with vision. When we listen before we announce, when we communicate with empathy, when we honor timing, when we tell a meaningful story, when we stay present, and when we serve rather than demand, we don't just execute change, we inspire transformation. Leadership that honors people will always outlast leadership that only serves process. If you lead with patience, humility, and courage, you don't just implement change, you build loyalty, resilience, and purpose that will carry your organization forward for years to come. Thank you for joining me today. I know your time is valuable, and I deeply appreciate you investing it in becoming the kind of leader the world desperately needs. Remember, leadership is not a title, it's a responsibility, and every small choice you make shapes the lives of those you serve. Stay courageous, stay present, and never forget that real leadership always starts with heart. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next session.